Welcome to 2025, and here is my KINGIFESTO, the manifesto for 2025. Number 1, free all IPP prisoners now, within the next month. You may not know what IPP is or who the IPP prisoners are. I would point you towards the Independent newspaper article published today on the last day of 2024 in December on the 31st, and ask you to Google it, find it and read it. You will then be as outraged as I am about the situation with those held in prison for decades for minor offences like stealing a mobile phone. KINGIFESTO 2. The Middle East. Stop it immediately. Stop this insane killing of your neighbours. Both Israel and Palestine must exist together. Both borders should be looked after. Both should have independent government. But most important of all, they should stop killing each other. Be it the Zionists or the Hamas or all the various assorted areas of the region who feel justified in behaving like lunatics. Stop it now. Peace immediately, please, as some of our great past leaders like Jimmy Carter, R.I.P., President Sadat at the time, Bill Clinton, various people like that. Please, peace in the Middle East. KINGIFESTO Part 3, Peace in Ukraine. Russia, move out of the areas of Ukraine you should not be in. Ukraine, give certain areas that actually would prefer to be Russian back to Russia. Mainly, the two of you stop killing each other now. Lawyers, immediately stop this insanity of British lawyers becoming completely useless. I actually think this is probably an international problem, but over the years, lawyers have become either useless or corrupt or weak. Look at what happened with the post office scandal. Everybody's blaming the post office and Horizon and all the various other aspects, which are quite right. They should have been sorted. But nobody seems to be picking on the hundreds, I think over 900, of defence lawyers, people who stood there on behalf of the wrongly accused sub-post office postmasters and failed to do anything. Time and again they failed. It took a major ITV programme to sort it out, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. All those lawyers did not do their job for years and years and years, and it continues. Look at the Andrew Malkinson situation. 17 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. He simply did not deserve that, and yet he had dozens of different lawyers trying to get him released and to get his conviction quashed. And they all failed until a tiny little charity, and by the way, if you're thinking of donating any money over this season, the Appeal charity, APPEAL, deserves your funds if possible. But it took a small charity to actually alert everybody to the disastrous situation that was Andrew Malkinson. And also that's continuing. He hasn't received any compensation. He is still penniless. He's basically relying on the generosity of others and mainly strangers. Lawyers have really screwed up over the years. Thousands of lawyers do not do their job. That has to be sorted in 2025. KINGIFESTO Point 5. Another massive, urgent, vital area has to be cleaned up. The false allegations industry. where people can make false claims against other people, be completely believed. Thank you so much, DPP Keir Starmer, who said, "You will be believed even if you are lying," to the police. Can you imagine a policeman being told you have to believe this person even if it's totally clear to you that they are after cash or revenge or sympathy, or they're deluded, or they're mad, or they are imagining something, or they are exaggerating something, or they want custody of children or whatever? No, you must ignore all that. You must believe them in whatever they say, even if they are lying. It's time for the false allegations industry to be brought to a halt in 2025. KINGIFESTO 6.6. How about the victims? The victims of the false allegations industry. People who have suffered unbelievably without being convicted of anything in many cases, or in some cases wrongly convicted. And you look at people like Prince Andrew. He's done nothing wrong. He's actually been convicted of nothing. Nothing has been proven against him. He's had to pay out a fortune to a blackmailer, essentially. And yet everyone around him seems to be considering him guilty, which is grossly unfair. These days, an allegation is all that's needed. You don't need to prove anything in a court of law. The presumption of innocence has disappeared, not just in law, but also in media and in public consumption. So you get other people like Philip Schofield. He did nothing wrong, but actually he is now condemned. Greg Wallace, he may have said a few things that were rather silly, but he's done nothing wrong. Completely condemned at the moment. All of the others, Hugh Edwards. Yes, Hugh Edwards obviously did something he shouldn't have done, but it wasn't a major indiscretion. His life has been ruined, and so has all those around him, his family, his friends, and everything else. It's happened to millions, especially those who are not famous and not well known. Absolutely hundreds of vicars and priests and doctors and social workers and foster parents and carers and all sorts of other people, teachers, who have been condemned by allegations. Some of them have been found guilty, quite often wrongly. A few, quite rightly. The vast majority weren't even convicted of anything. It's time we stood up for the real victims of false allegations and not the phony ones. KINGIFESTO, point 7. The media. It is time the media, and that includes all the media, including traditional media and social media, became responsible, started printing stories like the Independent story that I've mentioned earlier on IPP prisoners that they printed on the 31st of December. It's about time the media grew a backbone, and instead of following the path of this is popular and will get us sales and circulation figures, and actually forgot the is it a great story, or realised that sometimes the great story is the very opposite of what the public and the punters are telling you a great story is, and actually stood up and dared say, this is wrong, we must do something about it. Where in the media have been the pieces about the extraordinary failure of defence lawyers in the post office case, the Andrew Malkinson case, dozens of other cases? Nowhere do you read about it. And even other lawyers are rather keen to avoid such confrontation of their fellow lawyers. It's about time the media grew a backbone, some responsibility, and grew up. KINGIFESTO, point 8. It's about time the justice system was sorted out. The CCRC, the Criminal Complaints Organisation, sat up and did something. I read somewhere, and I can't say if this is accurate or not, but I read it, that only under 2% of those who are not represented by a lawyer get sent to the Court of Appeal, whereas about 8% who are represented by lawyers, may I point out, very expensive lawyers, get sent back to the Court of Appeal. Actually, both figures are appalling. I reckon it should be at least 50% and probably more than that. In my experience, about 80% are victims of exaggeration, if not pure invention. But even so, the CCRC needs to buck up and actually really start sending miscarriages of justice back to the Court of Appeal. And the courts themselves need to sit up, wake up and do something about it. Notice things that are going wrong. I think often the problem with lawyers are that they're very well intended, many of them, and really want to do the right thing, but simply have to take on too many things to be able to examine all the detail of every individual case. I know in every allegation made against me, it's the fact that I knew every sentence and every word of every allegation and was able to pinpoint all the specific lies, inaccuracies, mistakes, and so on that enabled me to remain now a free man. So it's about time that lawyers realise they've got to sit up and pay attention to detail. KINGIFESTO Part 9. This is quite important. It involves the commentators in media, and that's all sorts of media, again, traditional and social media. It's about time commentators started taking on more responsibility and not just making remarks based on their biases. Example, if they're basically conservatives, everything that the Labour Party does is wrong. Not necessarily so. Likewise, if they're Labour supporters, everything that anyone else does is wrong. Not necessarily so. It may be that Reform have got a couple of very good, fair points to make amongst the many that aren't right and aren't fair. It really is time that people started getting balanced. And if commentators got more balanced, there might be room for more truth. And that's the final part of my KINGIFESTO for 2025. Part 10, point 10, let's bring back decency and kindness and honesty and truth. Let's bring back examination in depth. Let's bring back complexity instead of simplicity. So many things are now decided by 3-word headlines from the tabloid newspapers. So many people have become so lazy, they don't bother to think about detail anymore. So let's bring back a little bit of depth of thought, consideration before deciding something, and a little bit more decency and kindness into humanity. Otherwise, I very much fear humanity may not exist for very much longer. Have a fantastic 2025.